Welcome back. If you're a UPSC aspirant, you know how crucial it is to understand today's big socio-legal debates. They're not just headlines, they're vital for your exams.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially for mains and potentially prelims, too.
Today, we're doing a deep dive into something significant happening in the UK, a recent Supreme Court decision about who counts as a woman under their Equality Act.
Yeah, it stirred up a huge amount of discussion, particularly around trans rights. Understanding this is really key, touching on things you'll cover in GS2, like social justice, polity, that kind of thing.
So our mission today, we're going to unpack this legal development, look at the debates swirling around it, and we're drawing heavily from an analysis published in The Hindu.
That's right. The Hindu piece really digs into the ruling, the rise of what's sometimes called trans-exclusionary feminism, legal oddities with existing laws over there, cultural anxieties.
Lots to cover.
Yeah, and even things like the separate but equal logic popping up again, plus what science and language tell us. It covers a lot of ground.
Okay, so let's start right there. What exactly did the UK Supreme Court decide? And how did the Hindu's analysis frame the immediate reaction?
So the absolute core of it is this. The UK Supreme Court ruled to exclude trans women from the legal definition of women, specifically within the context of their Equality Act, 2010.
Right. Seems specific, but you said it has wider impact.
Hugely wider. Because, as the Hindu analysis points out, while some people are framing it as, necessary to protect cisgender women's spaces or rights,
Okay.
the decision actually fits into a much broader trend of trans exclusion. And the article, interestingly, draws a line connecting this to a rhetoric used by figures like, say, Donald Trump.
Wow, okay. So the analysis immediately links the UK court ruling to these, well, global political figures and ideologies. It also mentioned trans-exclusionary feminism. Can you explain that a bit? What is it and what role does the article say it plays here?
Yeah, the piece in The Hindu calls it a kind of paradox, which I thought was insightful. It's this viewpoint, right, that claims it's feminist, but then uses feminist language or arguments to essentially argue for excluding trans women from spaces, from rights, things historically associated with women.
How does it justify that?
Well, the Hindu points out it often relies on appeals to safety or sometimes just common sense. But here's the crucial bit, especially for understanding social dynamics for your exams.
Right.
The article argues this rhetoric sounds worryingly similar to older far-right arguments, the kind focused on fear, this idea that some group is a threat or is somehow contaminating society.
And the article brings up J.K. Rowling specifically.
Yeah.
How does the Hindu piece discuss her role in all this?
It positions her as a very, very influential voice in this whole debate. Obviously, she has a massive platform.
Huge, yeah.
And her public stance campaigning against including trans women is highlighted in the article as something being, quote, celebrated by far-right actors globally.
Okay, that's a strong statement.
It is. And the analysis really emphasizes the power dynamic, someone with immense cultural, economic clout, using the language of, well, victimhood. The article suggests this mirrors broader strategies often seen on the far right, where marginalized groups get painted as dangerous to the mainstream. Definitely a pattern to watch for when you're analyzing social movements.
This ruling, though, doesn't it clash with existing UK law? I mean, they have the Gender Recognition Act, right, from 2004. How does the Hindu say this new decision fits with that?
That's a really sharp point, and crucial for understanding potential legal challenges down the line. The Hindu analysis argues this Supreme Court decision effectively, undermines the spirit, if not the precise letter, of that Gender Recognition Act.
How so?
Because that 2004 act was meant to give trans people legal recognition in their affirmed gender. Now, by excluding trans women from certain Equality Act protections, this new ruling really narrows the practical impact of that earlier recognition. It makes it less meaningful in day-to-day life, potentially.
So it creates a tension.
A big one. And the article asks a fundamental question for any democracy aiming for equality. Can you really square these kinds of exclusions with a genuine commitment to protecting everyone? Does the law now protect all women equally or only, cisgender women? It pushes towards what some call a biological essentialist view.
The piece also mentioned cultural fear-mongering. How does excluding trans women fit into that bigger picture, according to the Hindu?
The Hindu frames it as a kind of wedge issue.
Yeah.
It quotes someone suggesting it's becoming, unfortunately, perhaps the last acceptable form of bigotry. And that this allows older, more regressive ideas to sort of creep back into mainstream discussion. The core theme, the article argues, is a basic fear of fluidity, whether that's gender identity or just change in general.
A fear of things not fitting neat boxes.
Exactly. leading to this rigid insistence on binaries. Male, female, citizen, foreigner, use them. And the Hindu is pretty blunt, saying this kind of rigid binary thinking is not only scientifically questionable, but ethically problematic too, something key for your social justice understanding.
Okay, now what about defending this ruling? The Hindu analysis tackles the argument about separate but equal facilities. What's that line of reasoning, and what's the counter-argument presented?
This is where the analysis draws a really stark parallel. It directly compares it to the separate but equal idea used historically to justify racial segregation.
A very loaded comparison.
Extremely. The article notes some feminists are actually defending the UK ruling by saying, well, maybe separate facilities for cis and trans women is a fair compromise.
And the Hindus take
A strong rejection. It argues this not only dehumanizes trans women, but is dangerous for all women. Why? Because it could lead down a path towards institutionalizing, basically, gender policing.
gender policing.
Yeah, like who gets to check? Who decides if someone looks woman enough to use a certain space? The article asks, what kind of invasive scrutiny would everyone potentially face then? It even mentions the boxer Imani Khalif, assigned female at birth, but misgendered, highlighting how absurd and harmful these narrow definitions can become.
Yeah.
That historical link to segregation is vital for your UPSC thinking on equality.
There's also the science is real argument that often comes up.
Yeah.
How does the Hindu address that specific claim in this debate?
It argues that the people invoking science is real to deny trans identities often apply that principle, well, selectively. Meaning they might ignore scientific consensus on other things, vaccines, climate change, whatever, if it doesn't fit their political views. But more importantly, the Hindu stresses that modern biology itself actually shows a much more complex picture of sex than a simple binary. It points to natural variations in hormones, chromosomes, even brain development. This biological diversity kind of undermines the simplistic male-female model used to exclude. The article strongly suggests sexual diversity, like neurodiversity, has biological underpinnings. It isn't just some social whim. That's crucial when evaluating arguments based on biology.
And finally, the analysis touched on language, didn't it? How language itself is evolving.
Just briefly, yes. It noted that using the singular they pronoun isn't actually new in English, and it compared the push for inclusive language now to earlier feminist efforts for gender-neutral terms. The suggestion is that language evolving to reflect diverse human experience is, well, natural and necessary for accuracy and justice.
Okay, this has been a really thorough breakdown based on the Hindus' analysis, so let's try and summarize. For you, our listener, the dedicated UPSC aspirant, what are the absolute key takeaways to hold on to from this deep dive?
Okay, first, UK Supreme Court excluded trans women from the Equality Act's definition of women, creating tension with the earlier Gender Recognition Act. That's point one.
Got it.
Second, framing is key. Some say protection for cis women. The Hindu analysis links it to broader trans exclusion and even figures like Rowling and Trump.
Right, ideological links.
Third, understand trans-exclusionary feminism. The article flags its paradoxical use of feminist language for exclusion, echoing those far-right fear tactics.
Yeah.
Fourth, this ruling forces fundamental questions about equality itself. Who gets legal protection? How do we define sex and gender in law? Big questions for democratic society.
Absolutely.
Fifth, the separate but equal argument is deeply flawed. Remember the historical parallel to segregation and the risk of intrusive gender surveillance for everyone.
That's the point.
Sixth, arguments using science is real to deny trans identity. Often selective, ignoring actual biological diversity, which modern science acknowledges. Language also evolves towards inclusivity.
And the final takeaway.
The absolute core, according to the article. This is about power. Who gets to define reality? Whose identity gets validated by the state and society? That's the fundamental struggle.
That's a powerful summary and incredibly relevant for the kind of critical analysis needed for UPSC. So for you listening and preparing, really mull this over. How does this UK situation, this discourse, challenge our bedrock principles of equality, non-discrimination?
Yeah, think about the ripples. What could this mean for similar debates, legally and socially, perhaps in India or elsewhere? Always view it through the lens of constitutional values and human rights.
It definitely poses a critical question for your prep, doesn't it? How do these global shifts inform your understanding of social justice and constitutionalism, which are so central to especially GSSE?
Precisely.
Right. So if this deep dive based on the Hindu's analysis, helped you get a better handle on this really complex but important issue, the kind that could genuinely make a difference in your mains answers or give context for prelims,
We hope it did.
then please do hit like, subscribe so you don't miss our next session, and definitely leave us a comment, ask questions. Your feedback helps us focus these discussions on what you need for your UPSC journey.
Let us know what other tough topics you'd like us to tackle next time.